screen? Okay. All right, so thank you, everyone. My name is Alex Kohut. I am a PhD student at Boston University, and today I'll be presenting on vowel harmony and Ende nominal clitics. And these are the preliminary results of some research that is ongoing and that I have been doing as part of my qualifying paper. So this is an active puzzle, and I'm very curious to see what you all have to say about it. I'm glad to answer questions, but I'd love your input. Oops. Okay. So the plan for today is I'll start with some general background on Ende, and then I will address the issue of vowel harmony and describe the specific pattern of vowel harmony that has been described for Ende to date, which will feed into my research questions. At which point we can dig right into the meat and potatoes of the acoustic investigation and look at some of the puzzles that presents. And then I'll conclude with my initial preliminary thoughts on what this data seems to be saying, and some thoughts for further research and how I might want to pursue this project further. Okay. So Ende is one of 6 languages that make up the Pahoturi River Family, spoken in the Pahoturi River Valley in southern Papua New Guinea. It has just 600 to about 1,000 speakers. And at this point, I'd just like to give a shout out to Kate Lindsey. All of the data that I have been working with was data that she collected as part of her original field work. And so she has been very generously sharing with me and informed a lot of the research that I've done right now. So she has a lot of work on Ende, and if you're curious about her other projects, you can read there. So the last point on Ende is the vowel inventory. So here we see that Ende has 5 full oral vowels, E, A, A, O, and U, and then 2 central vowels, and E. And so I'll discuss this in a moment when I talk about the vowel harmony pattern, but I just wanted to introduce this here. Okay, so just a brief note. So when I say vowel harmony, what I'm talking about is a phonological phenomenon where vowels within a given domain systematically agree for a particular feature. So if we are to look at Ende, Ende exhibits progressive height harmony as described in Lindsey 2018. And so we have our class of high vowels, which act as triggers. And so when we have a vowel from the mid series following a high trigger vowel, it will be realized as its high counterpart. So for instance, A will be realized as E when it is following either E, I, or U. And then A is going to be opaque in this system, meaning that it does not undergo harmony, does not raise, and also blocks the subsequent spreading of harmony to further targets. Okay, so let's look at an example. So here we have the nominal clitic day. And when it is attached to a nominal stem where the final vowel is a mid vowel, we get the clitic vowel realized as A. However, when we compare that to the same nominal clitic attached to a nominal stem with a high final vowel, day is now being realized as D. So we see that the height of the target vowel here is agreeing with the height specification of the trigger vowel. Importantly, if we look across different types of nominal clitics, we don't always see this pattern applying. So the example here, we have peong, which is the commutative marker. And we see that even though the nominal stem ends in a vowel from the high series, the target vowel or the potential target vowel A is still being realized as A. So this suggests that there might be some differences across the different classes of clitics. Okay, so the domain of vowel harmony might be variable. However, one thing that's important to note here is that while Kate Lindsey was conducting her field research, this was a pattern that was observed fairly late in the documentation process. And so it is not systematically or consistently marked in the corpus and has not been systematically investigated. So this is sort of a suggestion that there is progressive height harmony in Ende, but there hasn't been targeted research on it, which is where my research comes in. So I have 3 research questions here. The first is there acoustic evidence of variation in the realization of clitic vowels? Do we see the alternations as described in Lindsey 2018? Or is this more idiosyncratic? Is there really not a significant difference between the way the vowels are realized? If there is this variation, and spoiler alert, there is the source of that variation more phonological in nature? So is it, do we see evidence supporting a true vowel harmony system, or is it going to be more phonetic in nature? And then the last question we have here is, do we see consistent patterns across the different clitic types? So that's that last point we saw in the final example where Payong did not behave like Day. This is a little bit of a tricky question. So for the purposes of today's presentation and because of time limitations, I'm really going to focus on these first 2 questions. Okay. So now we can go into the actual acoustic investigation. Okay. So just want to check the time. Okay. So I hypothesized 2 possible outcomes for this investigation. So I thought that we might see, on the one hand, target clitic vowels being realized categorically as high in the context of a preceding high trigger, or mid in the context of a preceding mid vowel or opaque vowel, low vowel. And then if we see this sort of 2 clear groupings in the realization of the clitic vowel, that would be indicative of true phonological vowel harmony. Alternatively, we might see a more gradient pattern where the height of the clitic vowel is correlated with the height of the preceding final vowel in the nominal stem. But we wouldn't necessarily see 2 clear groups. In other words, we would see just a general trend. And then this would be indicative of phonetic co-articulation. Okay, so there were 14 clitics documented that had this a vowel from the mid series that would have been a target for vowel harmony due to data limitations and what was available. Some of them are more frequent than others, and there's only so many hours of data available on this language because it is still not very well documented, or is in the process of being more well documented. I only ended up having enough data to really systematically look at 5 clitics. But for each of those 5 clitics, I pulled 25 tokens for each of the following 4 contexts. So I looked at a context where the clitic was following a nominal stem with a final high vowel, and then one where it was following a stem final mid vowel. I looked at these mixed nominal stems where you get an immediately preceding mid vowel, but then the vowel before that is high. And then the final context I looked at was opaque. So I pulled 25 tokens for each of these contexts for each of the clitics. Ultimately, after cleaning and limitations of the data, I ended up with 363 tokens. So this is a significant reduction in the data from what I originally pulled. So it's kind of disappointing, but there is enough here to see something. So we have 158 tokens for female speakers and 201 tokens for male speakers. Okay. So now let's look at what the results of that were. So basically I analyzed each of those tokens in Pratt, measured the demarcated the vowels, and then automatically pulled the F1 vowels for each of those, or the F1 values for each of those vowels. Okay. So here we have the different trigger vowel classes. So these would be final nominal stems that were either low, mid, the nominal stems where we got a high and mid, and then the nominal stems where we got this high trigger vowel. And then I plotted the F1 value for each of these groups, or not plotted, but I have the F1 values for each of these groups. So this is sort of just a sanity check. These are patterning like we would expect them to. So the acoustic properties of the trigger vowels are aligning nicely with the different trigger vowel classes that we've identified here. Okay. However, once we turn to the F1 values of the clitic vowels, this is a little bit perplexing. So ordinarily, if we were seeing evidence of vowel harmony, we would expect in the three non-harmonic contexts of low, mid, and high mid trigger vowels, we would expect those to be patterning down here where we would see lower realizations of the clitic vowel and then a higher realization of the clitic vowel in the high context. But we're not seeing that. We're seeing sort of non-differentiated acoustic properties for those different classes with respect to the clitic vowel. So this kind of suggests that we're not seeing vowel harmony here. However, when I plotted the height of the clitic vowel as a function of the height of the trigger vowel for each individual token, we do see a modest but statistically significant trend here. So this is meaningful, and so the clitic vowel F1 is correlated with the trigger vowel F1. So we can predict the height of the clitic vowel to some extent based on the height of the trigger vowel. So returning to our two hypotheses, there doesn't seem to be evidence of true phonological vowel harmony. However, there does seem to be some evidence of a phonetic co-articulation effect here. So now I just want to very briefly address this last research question. As I mentioned, it's not the focus of this presentation, unfortunately, because I ended up, after cleaning with so few tokens, when I try and subdivide the data further across the different clitic types and the different contexts, I don't really end up with enough data to do a meaningful acoustic investigation. However, it is worth noting that I did do a brief auditory investigation where I went through and I listened to each of the clitics and coded whether I was hearing them as a high realization or a non-high realization and across the different contexts. And these are the results that I'm seeing. So importantly, while the high section is patterning like I would expect based on what I was hearing, there seems to be different patterns across the three non-harmonic contexts for each of the different clitics. And so this is a little bit interesting, and I'm not really sure what to make of this. I think if we are seeing something that's more like phonetic co-articulation, there are other factors to take into account, and I'll discuss those in my future research ideas. So some preliminary thoughts. So it is not it is not a foregone conclusion that these data are necessarily reliable. It's fully possible that I was not demarcating the vowels appropriately, and therefore, vowel harmony may actually be productive in Ende, and I was just not measuring it correctly or looking at it correctly. However, the fact that the trigger vowels patterned acoustically like we anticipated makes me think that these are reliable data, in which case I have three main takeaways here. So the first point is that variation appears to be gradient rather than categorical. And since it is gradient rather than categorical, the data here are indicative of phonetic correlation, not harmony. And then the last point is it's not clear how to account for the variable realization across the different clitic types. Yeah, so that's just something I'm thinking about, and I need to continue to think about. And if you have thoughts, I'm happy to hear them. So next steps here, my main goal for the next step is to increase statistical power. I want to code more tokens for each of the 5 clitics that I'm looking at and really build up the number that I have so I can do a little bit more with that. I also want to look at low and high vowels in nominal clitics because if this is a co-articulation effect rather than vowel harmony, then we would expect this co-articulation effect to occur with low and high vowels in clitics as well as mid vowels. So this might also shed some light on the questions that I'm asking. So I would like to add that to my data. And then if this is more of a phonetic pattern, then I would also want to consider speech rate and the relative frequency of clitics and the collocations of the clitics and the nominal stems to which they're attached. And how that might be impacting vowel reduction, for instance, and the actual realizations we see. And then finally, I'd also like to look at the potential effect of the following vowel and the surrounding consonants as also possibly meaningful variables in the actual patterns that we're seeing. Finally, on the other hand, if this does seem to be more if we do have more evidence of vowel harmony, then it would be interesting to look and see if this is a productive phonological process, and is there psycholinguistic reality to it in the grammars of native speakers. And so that's sort of on the other side of things, potentially other directions. So that's what I have for now. As I said, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what's going on here. I'd also like to express my gratitude to my 3 readers, Kate Lindsey, Neil Myler, and Danny Erker. They've been immensely helpful throughout this process. I'd also like to thank Dan Hahn for helping me in the battle against R. And then I'd also like to thank you for your time and consideration. Here are my sources. And yeah. I'd like to hear what you have to say.